Hey guys, sorry I haven't been updating in a while. Life's been pretty hectic for me, but I hope I can make it up to you with this chapter. The Dating Contract by Miwakarai, an archive of her own. Chapter 7 The Galaxies in Your Eyes. Trigger warning, this chapter includes an anxiety attack, so if that's not for you, I would advise clicking off. Back in Adrian's room, Adrian sat in his bathtub full of water. He sat hugging his knees to his chest and crying softly. Adrian, Plague began. Save it, please. I'm not really in a joking mood, Adrian pleaded. Plague sighed. He knew he wasn't the greatest in counseling. If you just let me, I could cataclysm his ass out of Paris, Plague said angrily, and raised his fist at the door. Adrian laughed and looked up at Plague, his eyes puffy and red. Thanks, Plague, he smiled and wiped his nose. I wasn't joking, but sure. Plague smiled back, glad that he could pull Adrian out of the black hole he was sinking into. What if you go see Marionette? She always manages to cheer you up, Plague suggested. Nah, I don't want to bother her with something like this. He sighed and got out of the bathtub. He grabbed his towel and began to dry himself off as he walked to his bed and got dressed in his pajamas. Adrian, Plague tried to convince him again. Not to be cheesy, but you have to learn to talk about your feelings, like therapy or something. Otherwise, you'll end up like your father. I'll never end up like my father, Adrian promised Plague. Then go talk to someone, Plague said again. Fine. I'll wait till 1 a.m. to leave. That way I'll be sure not to get caught this time. Adrian nodded at Plague and began to construct a fake body out of pillows underneath his blankets. 1. Plague, wake up. Adrian used his finger to nudge Plague awake. Plague moaned in protest as his eyes fluttered open. I changed my mind. Bad idea. Let's just sleep tonight. Talk about our problems later at school, Plague protested in a sleepy voice. Plague, come on. I'll order you cheese on my phone again, Adrian bribed Plague. Oh, all right. Just say the thing already and we'll get this over with. Plague, claws out. As Cat Noir jumped from roof to roof, his mind began to cloud up again. This is such a bad idea. How selfish of me to wake her up this hour because of my problems. This has nothing to do with her, so why am I even bothering her with this sort of thing? Cat Noir found himself standing on Marionette's balcony as he talked out loud to himself. Guess there's no going back now. He stood on her balcony and looked down at the door beneath him. What if she gets annoyed with me? What if she's been annoyed with me this whole time? All I ever do is talk about my problems and Cat Noir felt his chest tighten. He brought up his hand to his heart and felt how quickly it was beating. Chill, he muttered to himself, but his brain and his heart seemed to have their mind of their own as the negative thoughts began to spiral. You're fine, he repeated to himself, but it was drowned out by the words by his father that he had said to him earlier that night. Everything came flooding back in at once, and he found himself hyperventilating. He gripped at his hair, almost trying to force out the bad thoughts from his mind. Plague, he called out, unable to finish his sentence to call out Plague. Cat Noir looked through his blurry vision as Marionette opened the door to the balcony and went running to him. Cat Noir! Hey, what's going on? She rushed to the ground to hold him. He hadn't even realized he had collapsed while he was sweating. Marionette's heart broke as she watched him on the ground. He shrunk into himself, his tail between his legs, and his ears dripped down. His arms were wrapped around himself and his head held down as he tried to cover his face. He looked so small, sitting there, like nothing like the Cat Noir she was used to. It hurt to see him suffering alone in the dark. Just anxiety. I'm sorry. I'll be fine, he muttered in between breaths. Marionette ignored him and ran to him, kneeling down in front of him and pressed his face onto her shoulder. Forcing Cat Noir to close his eyes, she pulled him into her embrace, wrapping her arms and legs around him, and began to rock back and forth as she stroked his hair. Little kitty on the roof, she sang. Safe and sound with his lady. She changed up the lyrics, hoping that it would be able to ground him. She heard him sing that song to himself many times as Ladybug. She just hoped he wouldn't question where she knew the song. She continued to sing and rock back and forth for a few minutes until his breath began to slow down. She rested her chin on his head and rocked him silently, trusting him to free herself from his embrace whenever he was ready. What caused this? Was it something that happened to his Cat Noir? Or his civilian form? Marionette asked herself as Cat Noir hiccuped and reached his hand in between their embrace to wipe his nose. Marionette took that as a sign to pull away and helped Cat Noir sit up and to face her. I'm sorry. Cat Noir pointed to the spot on her shirt, where it was wet with tears. Marionette shook her head. Don't worry. I actually prefer soggy shirts, she joked. Cat Noir smiled sadly. And for everything. For this. He motioned his hand at himself. Don't apologize for your feelings, Cat Noir. You're human. Don't ever forget that. She smiled at him warmly. Cat Noir felt as if he was falling apart into a million pieces, sinking into the spot of the floor that he was sitting on. Suddenly, he felt Marionette's hand hold up his face. One hand on each cheek, he mustered the energy to look up to meet her eyes. Cat, she muttered softly. There was concern in her face as her eyebrows furrowed together. No judgment inside her comforting blue eyes that stared back at him. Cat Noir felt his breathing come back. Slowly, he felt himself no longer gasping for air. He took a deep breath and slowly, but surely got his mind to calm down and focus on what was right in front of him. He looked up at her again. He noticed something different about the way she was staring into his eyes. It felt almost as if she was looking at him. Not Cat Noir, and certainly not Adrian, but she was looking past the mask and into his eyes. She was reaching to find him, to hold him, the real soul inside of him. Marionette. Cat Noir finally brought his breathing back to an average pace. He pulled her into a hug, feeling like he was being pieced back together as she tightly hugged him back. He moved closer to her until her arms were wrapped around him completely. He hadn't had a good cry or even a hug since his mother had vanished. It was nice to feel loved again. Did I wake you up? He asked. Marionette shook her head. I was working on a new project that Jack and Stella assigned for me. Would you like to come see it? She offered her hand out to him. He nodded and took it, grateful that she wasn't pressuring him to tell what happened. Both of them got up together and made their way down to the bedroom. It's right here. You can look at it while I grab something from the kitchen. Marionette pointed at her desk before leaving the room. Cat Noir looked over the design. His hand traced her notes and caught a glance at her journal. Our contract, he remembered. He turned around, startled, as the door swung open again. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to scare you, Kitty, Marionette whispered as she climbed back into her room. Here, I got you some milk and croissants, your favorite. She continued to whisper and held the plate of glass out to him. Thanks, Marionette. Cat Noir smiled at her and took them both from her hands. He hadn't realized how hungry he was after skipping dinner. Marionette watched as Cat Noir ate slowly but drank the milk quickly. His tail hung sadly between his ankles, contrary to what Marionette was used to seeing, his tail switching back and forth playfully. I won't ask you to tell me what happened, Cat. It's up to you, whatever you choose. I'll be right here by your side. You're safe now. Although I definitely think you need some rest. Marionette smiled and beckoned him to climb up into her bed with her. She opened the door leading to the balcony and turned off the lights. Laying on her bed, she patted the spot next to him for Cat Noir to lay down. He cautiously crawled next to her and lay down, burying his head under her arm and into her side. Look up, Kitty. Do you know what constellation is which? She encouraged him to lay flat on his back to look up at the sky above. After laying flat on his back, next to her, he could see the bright moon beaming down at them. She pointed up and began naming the stars all wrong. Cat Noir laughed and shook his head. Actually, the Big Dipper is right over there. Look. He took her hand and leaned closer to his face, so he could align their vision as he moved her hand for her to try to point to the right direction. He smiled slowly as he noticed their faces were close to each other. He could feel the wind of the air on his cheek when she exhaled. Okay, smart guy. Where's Ursa Major? Right here. Look, move closer. Cat Noir tried to show her. I can't. You're taking up that side. Marionette laughed and pushed him away playfully. Lay your head on my chest, then. It's on this side. Come. Cat Noir moved Marionette's hair out of the way so he wouldn't pull it as she moved to lay it right on his chest. Right there. He pointed up at this traced outline. Oh, I see it! Marionette yelled excitedly. Shh! Cat Noir chuckled. Oh, I see it, Marionette said again, this time in a low whisper. Cat Noir laughed again, loving the feeling of whatever you'd call this. He wished he could lay like this forever. After a few minutes of silence, he continued to stare up at the stars and said softly, It's my father. The one who made me spiral like this. I snuck out to save Paris, of course. He doesn't know I'm Cat Noir. So, to him, I'm just a disobedient son who snuck out. Cat Noir felt his voice shake, so he stopped to take a deep breath. Marionette grabbed his hand. If it's too painful to talk about, you don't have to continue, she muttered softly. Since her ear was pressed against his chest, she could now feel how fast his heart began to beat. She interlocked his fingers with hers, so their palms were pressed together, stroking the back of his hand with a thumb as a reminder to take his time. Cat Noir found the courage to continue. He just said all these really mean things about me, and I said some pretty bad stuff back. It's like I risk my life every single day to ensure the safety of the city, but to him, I'm just another problem he has to deal with. To him, I'm just a failure. A son. It's just so hard having to lead a double life and hide it from the people close to you. He sighed heavily again. Okay, first of all, you are not a problem that has to be dealt with, okay? Marionette propped herself up on her elbow and took his face in her hands, wiping the tears away from her cheeks. I know it may be difficult working so hard and feeling like no one acknowledges you, but I acknowledge that you work so hard. And so do all the citizens of Paris. Think of all the people you've helped decumanize. I know Ladybug, and so many times she's told me she could never have done it without you. Marionette sighed and laid back down on his chest. Maybe this is something you should talk to Ladybug about. I'm sure she'll be the one who understands you the most, Marionette suggested. Ladybug. Yeah, I trust her a lot. She's my best friend. Cat Noir turned his attention back to the stars above. Marionette smiled, thinking of what she could say to make him feel better. I can't say much as Marionette, but as Ladybug, I completely understand how you feel, Kitty, Marionette thought to herself. She shook her head to stop from overthinking and moved off his chest to rest on her pillow. She looked up and continued to point out the stars in an attempt to name and trace them. Cat Noir turned to the side and stared at her face. This is my girlfriend, huh? He thought to himself, somehow being unable to believe it. She's beautiful and kind. The way she talks about the stars, you'd think she's one of them. He smiled as she watched her big eyes reflect the black sky of a million little stars. They all seemed to dance in her eyes, her lips glistening softly under the moonlight. I love you, he muttered, as he felt his eyelids begin to grow heavy. I hate you too, Marionette giggled as she turned to face him. Her heart skipped a beat when she turned to face him and realized that he was already laying on his side, watching her. What are you staring at, silly kitty? She brought her hand up to his face and cupped his cheek. The whole universe dances in your eyes, Marionette, he whispered. She smiled as his milky breath hit her nose. Don't say such silly things. I might fall in love, Chat. She laughed and stroked his cheek with her thumb. Can't even compliment you back. I don't even know what you look like in real life, she thought to herself. I know what you're thinking. You want to compliment me back, but you don't even know what I really look like. And it's okay. It just gives me more time to compliment you. Cat Noir laughed as he noticed Marionette's eyebrows furrow, something she did when she was lost in her own thoughts. Let's see. Your ears are cute. He brought his hand up to her cheek and held it the way she was holding his, using his index finger to trace the curve of her ear. Marionette couldn't help but giggle. My ears? No one's ever complimented my ears before. Are you that sleepy? Shh. Next up is your lips. They always say the nicest things. So sincere and honest, he smiled. Marionette bit her lip in shame. If only you knew how often I had to lie, Kitty. Hey, close your eyes, Katnora whispered softly. Marinette nodded and did as she was told. She could feel Katnora moving closer to her, the warmness of his body closing to a few inches of distance between them. Okay, open them, he said to her. Marinette opened her eyes and saw that Katnora's face was almost touching hers. I was going to kiss you, but I got shy for some reason, Katnora admitted, his cheeks turning red. Shy? You? Impossible, Marinette laughed, feeling her face warm up as well. What's there to be shy about? We're legally dating, remember? She teased and touched the tip of his nose with her own. He laughed along with her, biting his closing eyelids. When I'm with you, Marinette, I feel like I'm a person, you know? Katnora muttered. No, I don't know. Can you explain? Marinette pressed her forehead to his. It's like I don't have to be Katnora with you. I don't have to be this hero or savior of Paris. I have no obligation to live up like the pedestal people have placed me on. Even if I'm a civilian form, I feel like I can't be myself. Yeah, I think I get it, Marinette sighed, wishing she could tell him how much she really understood him. When I'm with you, I feel... Katnora fought his eyelids as they began to close against his will, trying to find the words to describe exactly how in love with her he was. Go to sleep, kitty. I got you, Marinette whispered as she brought her hand from his face up to his blonde hair and softly stroked it. Katnora took the chance to move his hand from her face to her hip, pulling her in even closer than they had already been before, and threw one leg over hers. Normally I'd cuddle my pillow, but I guess you'll have to do for now. He laughed and yawned. Oh, shut up. Marinette rolled her eyes and playfully smacked his head. He brought his head down to rest under her chin, using her heartbeat as a lullaby. Smiling, she closed her eyes and continued stroking her hair until she could hear his breathing turn from loud to rapid to slow and rhythmic, signaling that he had fallen asleep. You must have been exhausted. Living a double life takes up all your energy, doesn't it? Physically, mentally, even emotionally. Thank you for enduring this, for sacrificing your civilian life to stay by my side, Katnora. There's no way I could ever be Ladybug without you. Don't worry, my prince. Someday I'll tell you the truth. But for now, sleep well, kitty. She whispered and leaned down to kiss his forehead. She moved slowly to not wake him up and pulled her blanket to cover up both of them before closing her eyes for the night.